Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Index or Office Hours. Today is the 6th of Feb, and this is IOH number 143. If anyone is new to Index or Office Hours, this is the town square for graph ecosystem participants to come together and discuss the most important topics relevant for indexers. We love participation, so don't hesitate to share your thoughts or questions, and you can do so either by voice or in the chat. As a reminder, this session is recorded and will be distributed via public channels like YouTube, so please bear that in mind. And with that, we'll jump into opening remarks, making mention of the latest episode of 𝗨𝗂𝗧𝗂𝗧, number 154, which is part 2 of Nick's interview with 𝗨𝗀𝗂𝗧𝗂𝗧𝗂𝗧. Do give that a listen. Another great episode. We actually don't have Abel or Anna with us today, so moving on to Repo Watch, I will jump in. There's not much to say. There haven't been many releases over the last week. There's one pre-release on Avalanche for the Fuji testnet, but nothing that anyone really needs to worry about. There's a new release of Arbitrum Nitro 2.2.3, and you should go ahead and upgrade to that. If you get an error on startup about an on-chain WASM module execution revert, then go check the release notes because there's more information for you. That's it for execution layer clients. On consensus layer clients, there have been a couple of releases. There's a new version of Prism, version 4.2.1. That's a recommended upgrade for all users, so go ahead and do that. And then Nimbus has had a new release, 24.2.0, which is a low urgency upgrade. But yeah, you can go ahead and do that, particularly if you are running the Holsky testnet. There are no new releases on the graph stack, so that brings us to the end of Repo Watch. Over to Juan for Protocol Watch.
Thanks, Chris. Awesome. So for Protocol Watch, we have a few things to cover. Getting into forum governance first. We have, first of all, Graph Horizon Explained, the proposal for the evolution of the protocol. There's a small update there, or a small feedback from Miguel there. We're going to be discussing this later, if I'm not mistaken. So just keep in touch in IOH, and we will be, getting deeper into this issue. Next up, we have support for two different chains. One is Starknet network, which is a new thread, or a new chain to be adding support for. There's a lot of, I think, a lot of information on how to run it, as far as I'm aware, and also for Linea mainnet, also adding a few examples on how to run the, the RPC node itself, and a few other, examples for subgraphs and stuff. Next up, we have forum research. We don't really have any new updates since last IOH for this one, which leads us to the contracts repository. We have a few outstanding PRs, mainly from, it seems that from the latest audit round, as there are a lot of, open Zeppelin nodes there. This includes some things as, adding input validation for execution threshold, changing the Oracle both event order, some gas optimization, and a few other fixes. For the network subgraphs, we have a small fix for total delegated tokens and total unstake lock tokens in the latest hotfix release, or patch release, which was released by Pablo. Thanks for the quick update on that one. And we also have, for the chronograph subgraph, we have a post-mortem article that we published last week. Mainly, this is for the incident when upgrading to the B0230, which was not announced properly and caused a lot of issues for third-party apps. We did an extensive research on what went wrong and how to avoid it in the future. And we are gonna be releasing, hopefully soon, some guidelines on the rollout procedures that we're gonna be following from now onwards. Actually, we have a breaking change coming relatively soon, but we want to publish the rollout procedures before we publish the breaking change. It shouldn't be a breaking change of this sort because it's actually kind of like a fix, but it's gonna be modifying the schema a little bit. So yeah, we want to make sure that all of the procedures are known before we go ahead and release another breaking change. But this should be the publishing of the article should be relatively soon, hopefully, and we will be doing everything in our power to announce all of the things properly and with time, so that there are no further incidents like this. For analytics and building subgraph, there are no new releases, so that leads to the end of Protocol Watch. I don't know if Paka is here. Doesn't seem like that, right? I don't see Paka. So I don't know if we're gonna be doing Project Watch or we go to open discussion, Chris.
That's a great question, Juan. Thanks for Protocol Watch there. I don't see Paka in the call, but I don't know if anyone else from Edge and Node might be giving that. If anyone wants to investigate,
Try turning it off and on again.
if anyone wants to investigate further, there are links to some Project Watch resources in the agenda, so do go ahead there and have a look. And with that, I think we will transition straight into the open discussion with a full 50 minutes to spare. Today, we are covering part 2 of a discussion on Graph Horizon and the post that Pablo shared on the Graph Forum a couple of weeks ago. I will drop a link to that in the chat. And by my memory, we concluded last session with still some appetite for questions about Horizon and where things were going. So I don't know if anyone, had thoughts that they wanted to share last time that they weren't able to. I know Mark and Dre, you had shared some thoughts. If you're open to it, it would be great to get a kind of restating of your perspective on things. Also, definitely invite Pablo to give any opening remarks. And yeah, let's get straight into it.
Right. Andre or Vince, I don't know if you guys want to make any comments. If not, I can start. Okay, so I think, a lot of the discussion last week went around the idea of consumer choice and the risk that if consumers can choose which indexers they're going to pay to index their subgraphs, and this could have sort of centralizing force where people end up choosing always the same indexers, or in particular, if gateways are the ones that are doing that choice, that I think is going to be the case. That gateways might do some form of nepotism, so to speak, where they have a sort of trusted set of indexers, which they outsource indexing. And in that case, like, we end up in something that's not quite a network, and it's more like each gateway paying their specific indexers, using some, maybe some sort of whitelist chain of which indexers they're going to use and which they're not. I had presented some arguments, kind of in part, based on Justin's talk about monopolies some time ago, that like the fact that this will be a market with very low barriers to entry, and that we're using economic security as an alternative to reputation should give us a lower even barrier to entry than in a market that doesn't have that, and therefore there should really be no reason for any gateway doing that to have an advantage over one that actually outsources to a gateway that uses an optimal ISA that actually chooses the best indexers, no matter who they are. So I think, yeah, as Matthew is saying, if gateways are permissionless, they can do that anyway. If we don't have this in the protocol, then it will happen outside the protocol. There's literally, I think, nothing we can really do to prevent that. We can treat this as a sort of like, if we wanted to kind of be against this, we could treat this as an off-protocol thing that people do, like against the protocol's rules, so to speak, but we still wouldn't be able to stop it, I think. And then I think Vince had suggested the idea of doing some form of consensus-based ISA, to which I had replied that I think it would be extremely challenging to do that, and it would always be a non-verifiable oracle sort of thing. So, in my opinion, that would make the network quite vulnerable to being taken over. Like whatever stake mechanism we use for that, we wouldn't even be able to kind of verify that the gateways are actually running that, and that they're like doing it honestly. And if we need to slash anyone, we wouldn't really have verifiable information with which to slash people for that. So that would be kind of a rather fragile system, in my opinion. But what I wanted to get to with all of these arguments, I think we've seen arguments on both sides, and if I haven't captured the strongman version of your arguments, I'd welcome you to present them again. But I guess what I wanted to propose is, since we're not proposing to turn off or change indexing rewards at this time, my perception would be that it would be a very low risk thing to do, to add this new mechanism that is the indexing fees, which has this choice sort of baked in, but presented in a way that doesn't have a sort of indexer menu, but the gateways that are being set up would just use ISA. And if someone permissionlessly sets up another gateway that does a different thing, then so be it. But we still have indexing rewards that are paying all indexers to participate, like according to the current rules of the protocol. So what I would suggest is, why not try it, having indexing rewards as something that still kind of works as a backup decentralization force, so to speak, and see what happens. Like, what happens if we try indexing fees, use it for a year, and we realize that actually what gateways are doing is the decentralized version of an ISA, because we can see that queries are being sent and indexing fee agreements are being sent to many indexers rather than being centralized on a few of them. And then maybe a year from now, or well, a year from the launch of this mechanism on the horizon, or however we do it, we can come back and evaluate and see if it actually worked as a centralizing force or not. So I guess that would be my proposal, because I think like we might end up running in circles with arguments on both sides, and I think both sides are hypothesizing on how things might play out. So maybe we can try it out and see what actually happens once we bring it to reality, and test the hypothesis that way. I don't know what you folks think.
I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, Pablo. Thank you. Also summarized the argument very well. I'm very skeptical that this could work, in the sense that to keep the sustainable, diverse indexer set, but going away, enabling dips first, watching what happens, observing, making some observation and adjustments, and while keeping indexing rewards in parallel. I think that's a good way. That's a good approach. And then, and basically, the switch will actually be once we disable indexing rewards, but we'll have the opportunity to discuss this milestone a lot before it happens.
на берегу и строить из него?
Go ahead, Marc-Andre.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Thanks. I mean, I'm glad we agree on that. I think in general, like we don't have a proposal right now for just turning off indexing rewards. I don't think that's like a plan that we're proposing. It's more like what happens if indexing fees and query fees pick up to the point where they produce an income that is comparable to indexing rewards today. Then maybe we can think about phasing them out in some way. But I think if until that happens, if we were to change the rewards mechanism, it wouldn't be just phasing them out, it would be replacing them with something else. So maybe like issuance will happen in some other way, but I think like if there is, unless there is like clear evidence that whatever's happening in the fees is sufficient to keep a thriving community of indexers, I don't think there would be any proposals to just turn that off and let indexers like out of business. Like I don't think that's in anyone's mind right now. You clarify, Vince, what part you're skeptical of?
I guess the main part is that I'm skeptical of is gateway centralization, and larger providers or whatever spinning up gateways and making partnerships to use that gateway, as some of these larger entities have direct contacts with some larger subgraphs that are actually producing query fees. And I'm skeptical that they will be the most used gateway. Devs will just go to that gateway the same way we've seen delegation flock to certain indexers just because number big. And I think if gateways start providing metrics and only a certain amount of gateways are providing a service, and it kind of becomes the de facto go-to gateways with a consortium or maybe a mercenary group of indexers that are only allowed to use that gateway, or possibly even creating a black market with the gateways and charging a whitelisting fee off chain. Like, hey, do you want to participate in the network? You got to use our gateway because all the subgraph devs that are actually producing queries use our gateway. So if you want to basically be profitable in this network, you got to use our gateway. No one's going to use yours. So go ahead and pay us this fee. And I'm just worried that this is going to turn into a small consortium of gateways with, I don't know, mercenary type tactics and the way service is provided, rather than, a bunch of indexers spinning up gateways. So basically, I'm just worried about the centralization of gateways in attune to, economics and brand recognition, and how that can skew traffic towards those things and taking advantage of that.
So don't you think that applies even without indexing fees? Like if people are choosing the consortium versus the network, doesn't that mean that like there's something wrong with how we're providing service from the network? Like it seems to me like if we have indexing rewards forever, for instance, but then at the query fee level, people are always going to this gateway that has this partnership or whatever, then doesn't that mean that we've already lost and that like we're just sustaining something artificially with indexing rewards in that case?
I mean, we are in a case right now. I don't think that it. I mean, obviously, I want it to be gateways permissionless, and maybe you can attune that to providing different services on your gateway. But I think at the upper level of the ISA, that should be selecting those gateways based on how they're performing, what services they provide, latency, all those things that, some of those metrics you can attune to the subgraph dev. What's most important to them? Is it integrity? Is it, decentralization? Is it speed? And I think at the top level, why those gateways are being selected should be abstracted away from how it's being selected. So I think gateways are great. I think, permissionless gateways are great. It's just how those gateways are selected is what I have, I guess, basically just what I'm skeptical of, that it won't turn into that, because it being possible, and I think if the incentive is there to create these small groups that are more profitable than everybody else and run everybody out of business, that's what's going to happen. That's just how capitalism works. It's the people are going to take advantage of that, and so I think gateways, yes. I think how they're selected, I don't think that should be in the hands of people.
Gateways are selected, you mean?
Yes, how the gateways are selected, basically. Like, I don't, as a consumer, choose Notify Gateway, and then I'm a very popular gateway, and I grab a couple people that are people I work with or colleagues or whatever, and I say, hey, oh, these 5 indexers can be on here, and I grab a lot of the query fees, and people are like, well, I want to, participate more meaningfully. Well, you can get on my gateway if I let you, basically.
Yeah, I mean, but again, this sounds like something we need to solve, like, orthogonally to whether we have indexing fees or any other mechanism. And if we have indexing rewards subsidizing a bunch of other indexers, if people don't use them, because you could always do this, like, more centralized gateway thing. Like, I don't see how that using the network for that gateway doesn't seem to be providing a lot of value, other than the PR of saying the PR value of saying I'm the graph network, but they're actually not, right?
Well, I think when we have a lot of services, I think those gateways will help the ISA, however that's done, attune and route services. So maybe my gateway just does RPCs and indexing, and maybe this gateway just does this. But when they talk and they report to the ISA, they say, I provide these services. So the ISA isn't routing, LLM queries to my gateway because I don't provide those services. So I think it's a good way to, basically attune your indexer to the services or services you have brought onto the gateway with maybe other indexers, permissionlessly, saying that this gateway provides these services. And on that top layer, the ISA is deciding what gateways it should go to, not, well, I'm going to use Notify Gateway because I am friends with them.
But that's, I mean, I don't see how we could have an ISA that's global outside of gateways. Like, the entry point for a consumer has to be a gateway, otherwise they need to run their own gateway or some other form of, like, super gateway. Like, I don't really see how we could get around that. I mean, I would love it if we could have a way for consumers to go directly to the graph abstractly and just from there, being able to be routed to wherever they need. But I don't see exactly how that works. Like, how would you, like, have an ISA that is outside of a gateway and that's not, because right now the ISA runs on the gateway. You go to a gateway, you have to choose a gateway because you have to go somewhere and from there be routed to your indexes.
Yeah.
I just don't see any feasible way to avoid that.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, just wanted to say I agree with Pablo. Like, somebody has to operate that entry point, and that's kind of the role of the gateway, is the operator of that entry point. And as much as, like, I appreciate the concern, because obviously we don't want centralization and we want to support a like decentralized indexer set. I actually have, like, some degree of faith in the market. Like, ultimately the consumer will be the one that chooses, that entry point, that gateway. Like, I do think there's no way around the consumer making that choice, and they should make that choice on the basis of whether they are happy with the quality of service they receive at the price that they pay. And if you were to imagine some like evil gateway that was extorting indexers and trying to extract, funds from them in order to participate in query traffic distribution, those costs are not like those costs factor into the wider economics of that gateway. So, like if indexers have this, let's say indexers have to pay a bribe to the gateway operator to be included, the indexer will shift that cost into their own unit economics, right? Like that cost will be reflected in the prices that they charge to that gateway. And this is kind of, sidestepping the question of whether an indexer could set different prices depending on the gateway. I'm assuming that would be possible, but assuming that's possible, then you should see that a gateway that tries to extort indexers has higher prices than a gateway operator that operates fairly in the market and doesn't impose that additional cost on indexers. One other point I would make, because I don't think there's been a lot of discussion about this, but I almost see a future where many consumers of the network choose to self-host a gateway, right? Like if a gateway really is just that entry point that provides, payment abstraction, allowing the consumer to pay for data costs on behalf of their end users, and supplier abstraction, selecting over indexers, I imagine many consumers might choose to just self-host that, right? Like maybe it's relatively easy and straightforward to do. It like minimizes costs, obviously comes with a very clear trade-off, which is that, that entry point is centrally operated and, could be shut down, but that's true of any gateway, any one of these entry points. And the only real way to get around that is to do client-side load balancing, right? Like if the interface that you expect is an endpoint, then somebody's always going to be responsible for operating that endpoint and, can always be shut down or censored. And the only way around that is to kind of change that interface so that the client, is natively multi-gateway aware and can like fail over to other gateways or whatever. But yeah, just wanted to make that point about consumer self-hosting gateways.
I'll say that I think I'm a little more worried about the UX on the user side. Like operating on the network is already really complicated for a user compared to especially legacy systems. And there's already these concept of many indexers and different data services and et cetera, et cetera. You're all familiar with the protocol pretty well. And then all of a sudden we introduce another concept of, but you have to choose the gateway that gives you the right performance for your needs and for the data services that you need. And then potentially additionally, you have to be aware of other gateways as you're operating on it. And if you see that your gateway is having poor performance, and switch over. And so there's some cost to monitor that and be aware of those comparisons. It just feels like another complex choice for a user to do that's not there today, that isn't adding a huge amount of value to their use case. So I'm just a little bit worried about introducing that complexity. It doesn't mean I don't think we should decentralize the gateways. It's just something that, like, maybe our interfaces, it's like a product question of how we expose that well to users without adding too much complexity. Chris, did you have a comment there?
No, I just, unfortunately, we kind of don't I think you're right that we really need to be thoughtful about how we introduce that complexity, but there is no way around it. Partially because gateways, as we've kind of discussed in the prior session a bit, I forget what the kind of formal name for this problem is, but there's kind of no way to verifiably measure or report on gateway performance. Like there's just the kind of service contract that exists between the gateway and the consumer is just completely subjective. And so because we can't verify what a good gateway is, the only way to kind of approach that is to, hand that over to the market, right? Allow participants to come in and compete against one another and provide the best possible service. But like the measurement of that quality of service will always be a subjective measure.
I wonder if there's some things we could do, like council still has some relevance here in that there could be a standard defined or a charter defined for how a gateway that is values aligned should behave. And the council could sort of, even if anyone can run a gateway without council approval because it's permissionless, it could be like what you show in the graph.com could be filtered by the things that the council or the technical advisory board deem to be like gateways that are using the network in the correct way, so to speak. And that might involve things like having an open source ISA. And I think there's still like, maybe there is a statistical proof that you can have. Like if you look at the query fees paid from a gateway to indexers, and you see that all the query fees or all the indexing fees are going to a small percentage of the active indexers on the network, then I think it's like it's not something you can verify, but you can with some confidence say that this gateway is actually kind of doing some form of nepotism. So maybe that could also be a way to evaluate these things. And then if the graph as a brand gathers network effects, then we could use that through this sort of council approval so that users are routed to the gateways that are like following this standard, at least as measured by the council or whoever the council appoints as the one like checking this.
Yeah, I guess my main question is, so if we do this whole decentralized gateway thing and the engineering lift is just too out of reach with metrics and all that stuff, if we do indeed have that gateway capture happen by a few private indexers or entities, what have we really achieved other than handing the gateways from a trusted core developer to a for-profit entity? If that does happen, like what have we achieved other than handing the keys over to a private entity that's for profit?
Right, but I mean, they like if there is a centralized entity that can provide a better service than the network, then we've lost no matter what we do in the protocol. Like it doesn't matter like that
Well, we've
gateway,
lost
that
trust.
malicious, but I mean that malicious gateway that wants to kind of attack the networking that way, they don't need to use a network to do that. They can just like hire a bunch of indexers, set up the service without using the contract, using the blockchain. That it's kind of a bit more expensive and inefficient to go through the contracts and go through the protocol if all you want to do is provide a centralized service. So I don't see how we can win as a community if we don't find a way to make the decentralized service better from its decentralization. Like, and if it is better because of its decentralization, then we shouldn't be scared of the centralizing force because people will go to the decentralized version because it's simply better. It works better. You have better QoS, better data services. You like no one gets censored, and you like that could be part of the PR. Like there are benefits of decentralization, and I think if we don't leverage them, then yes, we will lose against some centralized competitor. But they don't need to use the network to do that to beat us in that case. Like we can be better because we build better products, but also because we leverage that decentralization to our favor rather than using those kind of artificial mechanisms to limit who can get queries or whatever.
Well, I don't think the value in the graph is just the service, but I mean the core product being, the studio and having a marketplace. You can easily leverage that. The gateways and everything is a small piece to play for consumers because the end product is the data marketplace that we're creating. And I just think if you hand over, like if the private entity is better, that's fine. Like let's say Alchemy is better or Infura is better. Okay, then they're better and we need to do better. But if we're allowing better to happen within our own protocol, then that's bad, in my opinion. If the solution of better is centralized to a private entity for profit.
Yeah, but I mean, since they can already compete from the outside, I don't see how we can prevent that. And the way, in my opinion, to make things better is through standardization, through it's like, I don't know, ensuring that consumers that come to the network get the best possible experience in a decentralized way. So, like maybe if the council can, or if the user-facing parts of the graph's products send you towards the gateways that are actually giving the properly decentralized service, then I don't see how a centralized actor can come in and kind of beat us unless our products aren't good.
Yeah, and just as a thought, if that problem is too hard to solve, what about? I know it's commonplace to say let's DAO it, but what about taking the place from a core team running the gateways currently that we have and placing that in the hands of a DAO running gateways?
Do you mean
I mean, that
like
would be
keeping it permissioned and doing that, or making it
yeah,
permissionless
like
and
keeping
having
it a permissioned in the protocol, but the DAO utilizing that, like the DAO running the gateways. If decentralizing, I mean, technically the gateways will be decentralized because it'll be run through a DAO, but because abstracting that 3 different times on 2 different levels is a hard problem to solve. But if we took it out of the hands of a core dev and placed it into a DAO.
I think that would be an improvement from a core dev running a single gateway, but it would still be a single gateway. It would still be like, even if it's a DAO, I know a DAO is decentralized, it's more decentralized than, I don't know, a company, but it still gives you something that is not as robust and censorship resistant as something that's permissionless, where you have many instances run by many people. Like it wouldn't be architecturally decentralized. And maybe it would be a form of political decentralization, but it's much less than an actual thing where you have many gateways run by many entities.
Well,
And if that
couldn't
gateway
it
goes
be
down, like the network goes
well
down, that's
well, couldn't it be multiple gateways through DAO members that are abiding by a standard through governance from the council and running multiple gateways, but those DAO members being allowed to run gateways, but also under the guise of, how they're supposed to run it and in what way under the guise of governance.
I would support that as something that is done besides any permissions that happen on the smart contract level. I think what I had suggested of council kind of approving a list of gateways would kind of match with this, but I wouldn't suggest is doing this as like you need to do this in order to be able to pay fees into the network. I think like when we think about permissionless gateways, there's only one permission that is there, and that is actually being removed with the next council transaction. That is being able to pay fees into the rebate formula. That only makes sense if you want to pay fees through the protocol. But if a gateway wants to run all of the gateway stack and use the network in every way, and the only thing they want to do is pay indexers directly some other way, and they can use like any form of state channel to do that, then they can already do that. And there's nothing whatsoever we can do to prevent that, even if we wanted to try to keep that permission. That's why I think like if we want to make things permissionless at the contract level, so anyone can actually run a gateway and inject the fees into the protocol, which I think benefits everyone. Like, but we do this sort of either DAO or like approved graph friendly protocol gateway or something like that. And then I think maybe that's the best of both worlds, because you get the permissionless version. If anyone doesn't like the way this DAO or this set of gateways operates, or they're concerned about being censored by them, they can run a self-hosted gateway. But if you're like the regular like end data consumer, when you arrive at the graph, you're pointed to these gateways that are kind of running things in the standardized, approved way, so to speak. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. As long as if people want to compete on the side, they can go right ahead. I'm totally fine with that. But what the graph is pushing on Explorer, on services, on how the product works, if they want to go outside of that, I think anyone is fine to do that. But I think what the core protocol is pushing should point users towards, hey, here's this decentralized gateway, basically.
I think that could give us the best of both worlds. Then the main challenge there would be making sure that whatever service is provided by these gateways is super, super good in terms of UX. Because one of the things where I was thinking permissionless decentralized gateways might give like better results is in different, I don't know, billing mechanisms or subscription plans or whatever that are better at finding product market fit. If we can do that from within this sort of, I don't know, graph gateway consortium or whatever we want to call it, then that's fine with me. I don't know what other folks think. For me, the main risk is that in trying to ensure everyone behaves well, we end up having a subpar service from these gateways because they can't innovate and can buy better services for fear of going outside the rules.
Well, I
There
think
is a
that's
delicate
open
balance there, I think.
discussions. Yeah, I think that just lends to open discussions between the community, the council, and the DAO, and how they, if they want to innovate, that's something you can bring up and put a proposal up. That's the reason for why we have governance. And I think being able to innovate. I mean, obviously, there's that one small step where you can't just iterate on something and just push it. But I also think those checks and balances are a good thing. And having open discussions with the community, how it's run, why it's run this way, are we making our marks, are we hitting our OKRs, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would be fine with that. I think like it seems to me that the main concerns with gateways are two things. One is vendor lock-in, and the other is ISA. Maybe if we can kind of limit the scope of this DAO or these rules or these standards to these two things, like preventing vendor lock-in, like having a good way for people to move across gateways, and ensuring that everyone runs a like standardized ISA or that they don't cheat with the ISA, because maybe there can be different ISAs and different versions of that. Maybe what we need is like a minimum level of decentralization in those ISAs or something like that, like some standards for how they behave so that they don't end up like driving queries towards a small subset of indexes. I wonder, Matthew, if the gateway DAO should ensure the UX is good or if that should be up to the gateways trying to survive. They also, like, if they need to have a business model, right? And if they don't have a good UX, they'll simply work, like people won't use them.
Yeah, I think it's something where where this entity that doesn't exist yet has to provide some form of proposal that should be transparent to the community about, here's what we're going to provide, here's how soon we're going to provide it, not just kind of an open-ended, fund from the treasury or something, but like here's our OKRs, here's what we're going to do, and have some type of viable products. Also, the ability to make those viable products, and then iterate on that. But it should all be transparent in what's happening between the council and the Gateway DAO.
Makes sense. I'm curious, Chris, as a council member, what do you think of this idea?
My views are my own and don't represent that of the council. I would personally, would like to see the significance and like level of control that the council exercises in the ecosystem to go down. So would be hesitant to endorse plans to kind of add additional responsibilities or like levers of control. But yes, certainly I'm in favor of something like a gateway DAO or a consortia. I think that makes sense across a variety of points, like from a I think that, as a kind of independent, like standards body, this organization could like, provide like quite a broad array of utility to gateway operators and also to the kind of public or consumers by, providing kind of certifications and or membership, things like that. And I also think that it's important that we promote integrations with the graph that are not, basically that are kind of take advantage of a multi-gateway architecture, because if all of the integrations depend on, a single endpoint, then that entity, for the most part is always censorable. And so generally our integrations should be, like, we should encourage multi-gateway integrations. But, they're kind of downstream questions that come from that, because, if you have the consumer just, add multiple gateway endpoints, do you then force them to pay for, like, sign up and pay for subscription plans with each gateway? Obviously, few consumers will choose to do that. So perhaps part of the role of this consortia is to enable query key failover, such that consortia members support one another's query keys, in failover situations. So definitely, glad that we're having this conversation and agree that there's a role for this organization.
Thanks. That makes a lot of sense, and I agree in general. Like, it's good not to add more responsibilities for the council. I was certainly thinking of it being more of an independent thing, just set up by the council the first time, and then the council maybe steps back or something like that. But yeah, it should be something that works independently. I think this idea of having like failover keys where you can reuse keys from one, like you have a subscription with like one gateway, and then you can use it to query other gateways. I think that would be awesome. Maybe what would be necessary there is some protocol, I guess, for gateways to pay each other for the keys that they're keys to, right?
Sorry, Pablo, I didn't catch the end of that. Was it a question?
Well, that for that like failover keys thing, where you use a query key for one gateway to query a different gateway, maybe what we need is some form of protocol for gateways to pay each other for the queries that are done with like cross keys, so to speak. Like if I'm a gateway and my users query your gateway, then I should pay you for that usage. Kind of like roaming on cell phones, I guess.
That's an awesome analogy. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I actually I think the kind of technical status of the gateway is already that it supports something like this, in the sense that you could imagine the consortia members whitelisting each other's subscription smart contracts, which would in turn allow query keys from each other's smart contracts to be used across gateways. So then all that's missing. I mean, it would be amazing to have some kind of formal protocol for this, but I think the MVP is more just a reporting solution that allows, you know, consortium members to reconcile kind of out of, you know, like roaming usage and then, you know, settle payment for that.
Yeah, definitely. We don't need to build a full thing from the start. Yeah. I would be hesitant to kind of standardize something like a subscription contract, because like it's amazing if we can have one that actually works well, but the UX on-chain subscriptions is still so rough that I would very much rather let gateways kind of innovate and have their own billing mechanisms that might be more Web 2 style, or increased adoption.
Totally. Like you know, at the end of the day, every gateway, no matter, you know, how they choose to customize the ISA or, you know, however they choose to market or package the solution, like all of these operators are ultimately payers into the protocol. And as much as like I understand the concern that like we don't want a small set of gateways to kind of capture demand, I do kind of believe in the market's ability to resolve good outcomes for customers. And like, if a gateway operator starts misbehaving, like I think that will impact the, you know, price and quality of service and create an opportunity, even, you know, in the face of things like brand equity, which can be hard to disrupt. But yeah, I have faith. Like all of these gateways are payers into the protocol, and like that's good for indexers.
Considering we only have a few minutes, is it fair to say we have some form of consensus on kind of moving forward with indexing fees if we work towards this kind of gateway DAO or gateway standards entity to ensure ISA is unfairly, at least from the ones that are sort of approved by this consortium or whatever we call it, and keeping indexing rewards going for the time being? I think Crickets is good. Right. I mean, I'm happy with that. We can make a note of this on the forums. Obviously, if anyone gives it more thought and they can think of other concerns or questions or things like that, please share them on the forums and we can keep the discussion going. But I think it's good that we kind of came to some consensus on this. And I think the idea of standardizing on the ISA and having this sort of entity, I think it would be great. We obviously need to discuss it with perhaps Foundation and make sure everyone's on board, but sounds like a nice path forward.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us again, Pablo. It's always such a pleasure to have you here. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, always a pleasure.
Yeah, looking forward to more. Cool. Well, we're coming up against the top of the hour. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the contributors in today's discussion. I'm going to shout out, of course, Pablo, Steak Machine, Marc-Andre, Ford, Justin, Vince, of course. Thank you for all of your thoughts and for pushing forward the narrative. Yes, join us next time, of course. And as Pili notes in the chat, don't forget your POAP. The secret claim word is Horizon. And yeah, thanks everyone. See you next time. Goodbye.